So the accents are very different. And in France, for example, you would say, um, if you wanted to say, "What are you doing here?" you would say, "Qu'est-ce que tu fais ici?" Very, very proper, like "Qu'est-ce que tu fais ici?" Qu'est-ce que tu... Or even like "Qu'est-ce que tu fais ici?" That's more like Swiss. But anyways, I'm not very good at the accent. But in Quebec, it sounds more like "Sac tu fais ici?" Very different. And it's you can find where that would, sort of come in. Like sec is in qu'est-ce que tu fais? Sec tu fais. And then ici, like in France they say ici, and then in Quebec when they're really angry they put a T at the end for no reason. Just it just sounds meaner, I guess. So it's ici. And so yeah, some other things. I know a lot of angry things because people were angry at us a lot. But and so another one was when you say like get out is to say, like in France they would say what would they say? I don't know. I don't know what they would say. But the word for outside is dehors. It's like Dehors, but it sounds like dehors. And so, but when they're really angry, they will say dehors, and they'll put a W in it for some reason. And it was very. This lady was very mad at us, and I don't know how I didn't laugh when she said that, but afterwards we laughed a little bit. Dehors. She was like, "Wow!" I remember one of my companions. He was learning. I think I was his trainer, or no, I got him right after he was trained, and he was talking about how some guy was telling them how to speak Quebecois French, and he said, "Well, it's a good way to start a sentence is with ben, and a good way to end a sentence is with le." So, which is, I mean, not like every single sentence, but like you'll find that that's very common. They'll be like ben je sais pas là, ben ça que tu fais ici là, and like that was the one I used earlier. Did you catch it? Ben ça que tu fais ici là. That's just that is the syntax of a Quebecois sentence. So yeah. What else? It talked about how normal. I mean, like swear words in France are normal French swear words. You know, they're not. They don't mean anything. They were probably made up words or something like that. In Quebec, all of their swear words are religious words, and so like when somebody screams baptism, they don't want to get baptized. They're actually cursing, and so. Yeah, so watch out for that. Be careful when you say religious words around people. Make sure that it's in context and very clear that you. The worst part is that like the very worst word that you could say, and I'll use the English word so that I don't swear, is tabernacle. If you say that in if you say that in Quebec, it's equivalent to using the F word. So it's very difficult to talk about the Mormon Tabernacle Choir in Quebec. So yeah. So that's funny. In Quebec, they call their accent, well, there's two different ways to say it. Like I think outsiders will call it Quebecois. But if you're real, or I think the person is a Quebecois, and then the accent is called joual. Joual. So people from Lac Saint Jean, they have a very strong joual, and so they'll say like a normal person would say, "Je suis allé fetcher la vache," which means I went out to fetch the cow, and somebody from Lac Saint Jean would say it more like, "Je suis allé faire la vache." and it's very. And imagine that with no teeth. It's it's even worse. And so they'll use the word flat tire, and that's a French word in Quebec. And they'll say "J'ai un flat tire." That's the accent that they use. They even use an English R when they say it, but they think that it's French sometimes. Like I've heard a story of somebody coming up to a missionary and saying, "Comment dit flat tire en anglais?" Which means, "How do you say flat tire in English?" And the missionary responds, "That's an English word. It's flat tire." And he says, he's like, "No, that's not English." And he's just very confused. He thought that was a French word his whole life. And so like we'll say. And sometimes it's that way, but sometimes it's the other way around, because they'll say like they'll use very old French sometimes. So in France, a car is a voiture, une voiture. That's a car. But in Quebec, sometimes they'll refer to a car as a cart. They'll say like le char, and so that's. There's that, and so and in France even the stop signs say stop. They've invented a word, stoppe. That's in France, stoppe, and they also invented the word parking. But in Quebec, you don't park the car. C'est pas le parking. It's not parking. It's stationner. You stationize. I don't know how to say it, but you can't say parking, and you can't say and you don't use voiture as a car. You say char. Mostly in car terms, they'll use a lot of English words like il faut checker l'huile. You have to check the oil. Checker. That's a verb in French, I guess, and other stuff like that. Yep.
A big thing for me, at least with French, is learning pronunciation. If you don't learn to pronounce your words correctly, people won't understand you. They'll misunderstand you. They won't be sure. For example, once when we were going, we'd say, "Nous avons un message de Dieu," which is we have a message about God, or from God. And if you don't pronounce that correctly, like what I just did, I didn't pronounce it really correctly, or I didn't enunciate, people will think you have a massage from God. And they're very particular about that. But if you enunciate, if you practice, really paying attention about learning the pronunciation rules, that will make a big difference in your teaching and in not having to worry about understanding or being understood. In French, people talk quickly, but like I said, they're very clear. So in English, we tend to be really lazy with our mouth. You can kind of say anything you want, but you don't have to move very much. And in France, it's a very active language. So your tongue is particular, your lips, how you form words and things like that. Practice is, of course, the biggest thing. Getting out and speaking all the time, trying. My trainer said that for him, one of the most important things in learning the language was listening, especially at the beginning of your mission, even when you don't think that it'll do any good. My first few days, I would be at a dinner appointment, and I would listen for a little bit, and I would try to follow conversations, and then I would zone out, and I would look around and just kind of hear these things. And he said you need to just not zone out. Just keep trying to pay attention. And that was a big help for me.
You know, I think one thing that I would focus on more is having more faith in myself with the language, because the language is something that I really struggled with. And I struggled quite a bit with the language, and I even had a blessing towards the beginning of my mission because of it. And I was told that the trial of your mission is going to be the language. And so I lost a lot of faith in myself. But I had some amazing experiences where the gift of tongues did come into play, which I am eternally grateful for. Well, I did struggle with learning the language, and which is okay. It is okay. And this is something that I have recently discovered because for many, many years, because I did struggle with the language, there have been times where I have beat myself up inside. And like, oh, I could have been more effective if I'd just been able to get the language down better. But I got to a point where I was able to speak to people and BRT with them, build relationships of trust for about 5 minutes. And then after that, it's like, oh, we got to move on to the lesson because I have no more vocabulary here. And I felt bad at times because there were times where my companions would have to really lead the discussions because our investigators would speak too fast and it would go right over my head with the language. But I also had an experience one time where this was my first area. My companion, we had stopped and talked to this one lady, and I didn't have a clue what was going on. I'd only been out there for about 3 weeks or so. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I did introduce us. I introduced us, bonjour, nous sommes les missionnaires à l'église. I was able to give the spiel of who we are. But from there, my companion had to take over. And I could tell that there was a little bit of a struggle. My companion was talking to her and trying to figure out exactly what to say next. But I know that the Spirit spoke to me and said, bear your testimony right now on this. And so I did. I looked at this lady and I bore my testimony to her, not knowing where the conversation was going. But I bore my testimony to her. And she said something to me, and I had no idea what it was she was saying. I just smiled, because I could feel the spirit of what she was saying, but I had no clue what she was saying. And then she turned to my companion and she said, yes, yeah, let's set up an appointment. And I was still standing there going, I don't know what's going on. She left, and my companion had tears falling down her face. And she looked at me and she said, you don't know what just happened, do you? And I said, I have no clue. What just happened? And she said, I was trying to set up an appointment with her so we could come. But she just wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if she wanted to meet with us. And then you bore testimony to her of exactly what I was trying to say to her, but I didn't know how to word it. And she looked at you and she said, I see Christ in your eyes. Yes, I want to meet with you guys. So even though I was struggling with the language, there were moments where it was okay because it's not the language. It's not the language that touches people's hearts. It's the Spirit. And a girl that I met in my second area, she's Portuguese, and her name is Honorina. I just love her to pieces. But she's got a nickname. Her nickname is Nono. A cute nickname. And she barely spoke English, and I was struggling with the French language, and we were very close. She and I were very close. I spoke to her the best I could in French, and she spoke to me the best she could, broken English here and there. She did marry an American guy, and she is fluent in English now. So when we talk, she lives in Idaho now, and when we talk, we speak in English. She's actually a school teacher now here in America. But she told me one time, this is about 1.5 years ago, I had been having a difficult week because I've been hearing a lot of people talk about the language in the mission field and how they picked up on it quickly and how fun it was, and they still speak it to this day. And I started beating myself up that week. And I was on the phone with her this one day, and I told her, I said, that was just such a struggle for me. And she knew because she was in the mission with me as a girl that I was teaching. And she said to me, Susan, it's okay. She said, you did not, you had the gift of tongues. And I said, what do you mean I had the gift of tongues? She said, it wasn't the language, it was the Spirit. And the gift of tongues has nothing to do with it's not just the language, it's communication. And you communicated to me through the Spirit. And that's where your gift of tongues came in. So I guess what I want to say is, for those who are struggling with worrying about the language, or maybe you have a family member that is out there in the mission field right now who is struggling with the language. The gift of tongues is through the Spirit and communication, whether that's through voice, through your words, or through the Spirit that you have brought to that person.
So French it's pretty hard for a lot of the missionaries. There are a lot of native speakers, though, in the mission, so that's really nice to talk to. And I know that my language really improved. I had a companion from Italy who didn't speak English but spoke perfect, flawless French. And we just spoke French all the time, and my French improved so much, that transfer. But I don't know, I feel like in my first couple transfers, I would or I'd say the prayer, or I'd say Joseph Smith's, I memorized Joseph Smith's first vision, and I just thought, okay, I can do this. And I'd give the prayer, and the people we teach would be like, I don't understand a thing you're saying, but you have beautiful teeth. Or they'd say something like, we'd sing a song before, and they'd say, oh, you have such a nice singing voice, but I just don't understand you. Can your companion talk? And I just thought that was so funny. Like, they were so gentle but honest. They're like, oh, you're trying, but I really want to understand this. And missionaries just shouldn't get down on their accent. Forever, people were like, oh, you're going to come home and you're going to speak French with a French accent, or, oh, do you have a French or Belgian accent? That's what all missionaries like to think, that they either spoke French with a French accent or a Belgian accent. And honestly, everybody just speaks French with an American accent. So don't feel bad about that. The R's are the hardest. It's the H, and I'll never say it right. But so the word éternité, like l'éternité for eternity, like if a native French person sees this, they'll know I'm butchering it, but it's kind of the H in the back of the throat. And I just remember, I think it was the middle of my mission, kind of like the 9-month mark, and I just remember knocking on a door in France, and I said my little, hi, we're missionaries, nous sommes les missionnaires de l'Église de Jésus-Christ des Saints des Derniers Jours, nous avons un message pour vous. And he just looked at me, and he said in French, he's like, I don't understand a word you just said, and now I'm going to close the door. And he closed the door in our faces, and me and my companion just laughed so hard. Like, midway through my mission, people in French did not understand me. And just so funny. And then at my year point, I was serving in Versailles, which is a gorgeous city, and the Relief Society president, she just looked at me, and she's like, it will never happen. She's like, you're never going to speak French perfectly. She's like, my husband is an Ivy League. He went to an Ivy League college. He's married to me, a native speaker. He doesn't speak French. She's like, it will never happen. And I thought, thank you for your honesty, however blunt. And, that was my year mark. And I thought, okay, it can only get better maybe. And so don't feel bad about the language. It can always get better.